生命绿洲照顾老人的18个细节。
18 Details of Caring for the Elderly in the New Oasis for Life. Jiefeng. April 9, 2020. Translated by Qin Yu and edited by Kayer. We must completely end the problem of people spending their final years lonely and in misery, which has been the case since the beginning of human history. In the new Oasis for Life, we must allow elderly people to live a carefree and picturesque fairy life, and let them always be in the company of middle-aged and young people and even children, so that they can fully enjoy the beauty of old-age life. Below are 18 details of caring for the elderly in the new Oasis for Life. The best rooms are reserved for the elderly. The best food is reserved for the elderly. Specially trained people care for the elderly. Every night one person is tasked with saying good night to the elderly. Every morning, someone sees that the elderly has all woken up, and helps them to wash themselves and eat their breakfasts. People ask how the elderly people feel every day, and whether they need anything so as to meet their needs to the maximum. Someone assists the elderly to take baths, being careful that they do not slip or fall. People hold the arms of those with mobility issues. The elderly's rooms are kept clean, tidy, and airy. Bed sheets, quilt covers, and pillowcases used by the elderly are changed and washed at least once every 3 days. Clothes worn by the elderly are changed and washed at least once every 3 days. Help is given to scrub the elderly's bodies and wash their hair if they cannot wash themselves. The most comfortable seats are positioned in the best places for the elderly during entertainment parties. Clean boiled water is available at all times in the elderly's rooms, so they can drink it at any time. Food is delivered to the elderly if they are unable to walk to the canteen. The elderly is accompanied often to walk around in the courtyards and fields, and to chat with them to eliminate their loneliness. Roads over which the elderly often pass are smoothed to avoid tripping. Fun activities are organized for the elderly to participate in and keep them happy. According to Chanyuan values and the more than 10 years of practice of the new Oasis for Life, our goal is that every Chanyuan celestial should be able to live to 120 years of age. In the new Oasis for Life, the definition of elderly is anyone who is at least 80 years young. Then they can start enjoying this kind of treatment. Actually, some of our elderly people are more than 80 years young but continue to do physical work every day, while many over 70 years are still working as energetically as much younger people. Therefore, in the new Oasis for Life, members in their 60s and 70s are called middle-aged, and anyone under 60 is considered a young person. Every Chanyuan celestial who reaches the age of 120 years is encouraged to leave the mortal world immediately without nostalgia for it. We send the elderly people to the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, or the Elysium Celestial Islands continent through the method of being free from the mortal body in meditation.
禅院草已达到的境界。
The realms that Chanyuan celestials have. 18 Details of Caring for the Elderly in the New Oasis for Life. Jiefeng. April 9, 2020. Translated by Qin Yu and edited by Kayer. We must completely end the problem of people spending their final years lonely and in misery, which has been the case since the beginning of human history. In the new Oasis for Life, we must allow elderly people to live a carefree and picturesque fairy life, and let them always be in the company of middle-aged and young people and even children, so that they can fully enjoy the beauty of old-age life. Below are 18 details of caring for the elderly in the new Oasis for Life. The best rooms are reserved for the elderly. The best food is reserved for the elderly. Specially trained people care for the elderly. Every night one person is tasked with saying good night to the elderly. Every morning, someone sees that the elderly has all woken up, and helps them to wash themselves and eat their breakfasts. People ask how the elderly people feel every day, and whether they need anything so as to meet their needs to the maximum. Someone assists the elderly to take baths, being careful that they do not slip or fall. People hold the arms of those with mobility issues. The elderly's rooms are kept clean, tidy, and airy. Bed sheets, quilt covers, and pillowcases used by the elderly are changed and washed at least once every 3 days. Clothes worn by the elderly are changed and washed at least once every 3 days. Help is given to scrub the elderly's bodies and wash their hair if they cannot wash themselves. The most comfortable seats are positioned in the best places for the elderly during entertainment parties. Clean boiled water is available at all times in the elderly's rooms, so they can drink it at any time. Food is delivered to the elderly if they are unable to walk to the canteen. The elderly is accompanied often to walk around in the courtyards and fields, and to chat with them to eliminate their loneliness. Roads over which the elderly often pass are smoothed to avoid tripping. Fun activities are organized for the elderly to participate in and keep them happy. According to Chanyuan values and the more than 10 years of practice of the new Oasis for Life, our goal is that every Chanyuan celestial should be able to live to 120 years of age. In the new Oasis for Life, the definition of elderly is anyone who is at least 80 years young. Then they can start enjoying this kind of treatment. Actually, some of our elderly people are more than 80 years young but continue to do physical work every day, while many over 70 years are still working as energetically as much younger people. Therefore, in the new Oasis for Life, members in their 60s and 70s are called middle-aged, and anyone under 60 is considered a young person. Every Chanyuan celestial who reaches the age of 120 years is encouraged to leave the mortal world immediately without nostalgia for it. We send the elderly people to the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, or the Elysium Celestial Islands continent through the method of being free from the mortal body in meditation.
禅院草已达到的境界
The realms that Chanyuan celestials have achieved. Jiefeng. May 3, 2020. Translated by Qin Yu and edited by Kayer. There were more than 2,000 Chanyuan celestials in 2009. After more than 10 years, only 444 of them remain, so it can be seen how strict the Life Chanyuan elimination mechanism has been. Of these remaining Chanyuan celestials, at least half of them are unqualified but the truly compliant ripe crops, who can be harvested into the granary of the kingdom of heaven, is only slightly more than 100. These are the tops in the world. That is, only very few people can enter heaven, and if you do not believe me, then just check the following and see if you can reach the level that these more than 100 fortunate souls have achieved. They have transcended life and death. Even if the more than 100 Chanyuan celestials die now, they would not hesitate or have any fear, but will face death calmly and joyfully. Death is like changing a car or a boat, and its threat would never make them succumb. Any temptation is powerless to them. You could offer them $100 million to leave Jiefeng, but they would remain indifferent. Money, power, fame, gain, and carnal pleasure can neither touch them nor shake their faith. They are calm in the face of both favor and disgrace. However, you praise or eulogize them would not persuade them to comply. No matter how you insult, derogate, or threaten them, they would not get angry. Owning nothing, possessing neither tangible material things nor intangible non-material things, they have no relatives, no enemies, let alone any lovers, and are in an ethereal and beautiful state of being that is one with Tao. They have no desires, take things as they come, associate with others by following predestined relations, act in accordance with their natures, take advantage of opportunities that arise, and are in a state of inaction. They will neither argue with anyone nor comment on who is right or wrong. They have surpassed the dualistic Taiji thinking and entered into the holographic state of non-form thinking. They never panic or complain about others when adversity or danger is at their door, but remain at ease, natural and unrestrained. They never complain, compare themselves to or find fault with others, suffer from envy, are always blooming with the nature of Tathagata, and are always full of energy and infinite vitality. There are many more descriptions that can be stated, but how many people can achieve even these 8 states? Many truths taught by Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, and other wise masters are easy to learn and even to understand, but they are next to impossible to live. If you do not believe me, then just try them yourself. How were we able to reach such high levels of self-improvement and self-cultivation in Life Genuine within only about 10 years? This is very simple to answer. It is that we have grasped the core of self-improvement and self-cultivation, and our precious time has not been wasted on chanting scriptures, casting spells, practicing and sitting in meditation, understanding obscure concepts, reading a vast sea of chicken soup for the soul, preaching and debating, paying attention to and worrying about changes in our current situation or natural changes, nor has it been wasted on the mundane affairs of human relations in daily life. We did 3 things earnestly. We repaid our debts and severed our secular ties. We accumulated merits and treasures in heaven. We perfected our life's non-material structure by living collectively. Chanyuan celestials are rising to the highest realms of life and life, and it can be said with pride that these more than 100 Chanyuan celestials have stood at a higher realm of life than any other people throughout all of human history. Only these nearly 100 people have collectively achieved it. This is a miracle, a feat, and more than a myth.
庆贺雪峰是共产主义诞生12周年。
Celebrating the 12th anniversary of Xiefeng-style communism. Xiefeng. April 18, 2021. Translated by Qin Yu and edited by Kair. On April 18, 2009, a group of Chanyuan celestials gathered in Taiyuan City, Shaanxi Province, China, and began living the Xiefeng-style communist lifestyle. Since then, 18 homes have been built in Kunming, Anning, Chuxiong, Linsong, Lijiang, Nanjing, Aksu and Korla of Xinjiang, Canada, Thailand, and other places. The construction has lasted for a dozen years, has taken us across tens of thousands of kilometers, and has never stopped. Over the past 2,000 years, the Chinese nation has added few contributions to human civilization, either ideologically or scientifically and technologically. On the one hand, we enjoy the fruits of Western civilization, yet on the other we belittle it. We are not grateful. It is like a beggar wearing fresh, new clothing, and feeling that they have become aristocratic, but have instead only become ignorant, arrogant, non-virtuous, and barbarous. This accused style of national pride is pitiful and pathetic. Only Xiefeng-style communism can bring the Chinese nation into the ranks of human civilization. It would be the greatest contribution from China to human civilization, and would surpass all the values of Western civilization to become a beacon that would shine on the progress of humankind. During the 4 dozen hot and cold seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, this group of Chanyuan celestials, striving for Xiefeng-style communism, has suffered a multitude of hardships and humiliation. They were forced out of their picturesque homes which they had built with their own blood, sweat, and tears, and had to keep moving to different areas throughout China. They were reborn from their old ruins again and again. Many Chanyuan celestials fell and left Life Genuine along the way. The road to civilization was difficult and dangerous. Barbarism shrouded the clear sky like sandstorms, and flooded over the dams of civilization again and again. Ever since the first emperor of the Qin dynasty burned books and buried Confucian scholars alive, the backbone of the Chinese nation has been broken, the kingdom of God has become godless, and the other leaders were either big or small tyrants or submissive slaves to colonizers. The suppression of new ideas has become the main theme of the Chinese nation. Chanyuan celestials have not been intimidated by these difficulties. In this age of material desires and moral corruption, they have always stuck to their beliefs and the bottom line of civilization. Over the past dozen years, no Chanyuan celestials have committed any crimes, and no harm has been done to human society or to nature. Only their quality of truth, kindness, beauty, love, honesty, and peace flickers in the dark sky. We will neither beg pitifully for a green light nor give up our dignity to ask for anyone's help. We cannot gamble on the chance that people might have consciences. We know that there will be wolves, tigers, leopards, turbulent rivers, treacherous shoals, and even cliffs along our road ahead, But they have not, do not, and will not ever frighten us because we have already left life and death out of our consideration. Even if we must eat stale bread with impure water, dress in rags, we will continue to move forward in a natural and unrestrained way. If people do not change their traditional modes of production and life, they will face endless bitterness. The Western capitalist system has proven itself to be no more helpful, and the so-called socialism can only prolong its last gasp. Relying on any existing religious or political party doctrines will never bring people into the era of the talented will be put to good use and the whole world will be one family. No one will pocket anything found on the ground and doors will not be bolted at night, and where people live and work happily, peacefully, and contentedly. Any thinkers, philosophers, sociologists, or so-called practitioners who fail to think about practicing Xiafeng-style communism are merely self-sentimental groans, nonsensical affairs, thoughtless works and actions, and patches on old clothes. Any of them who do not understand the space and time of the universe, the truth of life, how Tao works, and the ways and laws of nature, are blind and incapable, and will lead you into fire pits. The prelude to the great adjustment of life in the universe is underway. The plot will become more and more sudden and violent, and no one will be able to resist it. Just as when the plague god makes people around the world wear masks at the same time, presidents all have to wear them obediently, not to mention ordinary people. May people sublimate into Xiafeng-style communism as soon as possible. It is the only Noah's Ark of our era.
加拿大是生命禅院，是国际大家庭。
Canada is like the Life-Chanuan International Family. Xiafeng. August 30th, 2020. Translated by Qin Yu and edited by Kayer. What kind of country is Canada? From his foot we can measure Achilles. I would like to share my recent experience in Canada for your consideration. A Huang Celestial, my partner for many years, became ill on the morning of August 5th, so I called the emergency medical services. Half an hour later, an ambulance arrived at the Life-Chanuan International Family in Lac La Hatch. 2 first aid specialists carried her on a stretcher into an ambulance and quickly drove her to our local hospital at 100 Mile House, more than 30 kilometers away, where emergency treatment was begun. At 1 o'clock in the morning that night, our local hospital transferred her to the intensive care unit of the Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops, more than 200 kilometers away, where general examinations and treatments were carried out and 24-hour care was provided. After a few days, Royal Inland sent her to Kelowna Hospital, another 200 kilometers away, where an operation was performed that same day. That night, a Huang was sent back to Kamloops by ambulance, and on August 16th, they returned her to Kelowna Hospital once again. On August 17th, a very complicated double heart procedure was performed, and after the operation, she recovered there. On August 22nd, I brought a Huang back to Life-Chanuan International Family. I did a rough calculation, and excluding the laboratory staff, more than 80 doctors and nurses from the 3 hospitals had been involved in her treatment. The efficiency of the hospitals was unimaginable. Every doctor and nurse was simply an angel on earth. That kind of concern, love, sense of responsibility and care touched me to no end. Whenever the hospital heads, doctors, and nurses asked me if everything was okay or if I had any other needs, I always answered that she and I were fully satisfied, that there was not the slightest thing to find fault with, and that everyone was doing everything perfectly. For example, the doctor who performed her procedure described to me in detail what they would do before and after the operation, and after it had been completed, he called and told me that the operation was successful and everything went well, so that I could relax. The hospital chefs prepared each meal specially according to the patient's condition, and each one came with a printed note that listed the specific food, the patient's name, the time, and some nutritional information. The attitudes of the doctors, nurses, and chefs were kind from beginning to end. Their tones of voices were gentle and warm, and every detail was arranged accurately. What is more moving was that when a Huang was sent from Kamloops to Kelowna Hospital, a doctor from the 100 Mile House Hospital drove for more than 3 hours to the hospital in Kamloops to accompany a Huang to the Kelowna Hospital, and gave me his phone number to contact him at any time. I drove from Kamloops to the Kelowna Hospital, but since I took longer than the ambulance did, A nurse from the Kelowna hospital called me twice to ask about my progress, and when I eventually arrived, she stood waiting for me at the entrance to the hospital and led me to the operating room immediately. Before leaving the hospital, a staff nurse asked for some details about our home, such as how many steps there were, whether we had stools for showering, and so forth. When I told her that we had none, she immediately contacted the Red Cross in my area to provide suitable equipment. When I returned home, I went straight there, and since they had been told everything well in advance, they could quickly go through the procedure for using the equipment safely with me. According to a knowledgeable person, our medical expenses would have come to nearly 2/3 of a million Canadian dollars, which is the equivalent of more than 3 million RMB yuan, but that the Canadian government bore all of our costs. We never paid a penny, not even for the ambulance rides before and after the operation. Huang stayed in a single private room filled with life-saving equipment from start to finish. This time I found that the bed was almost a cartoon transformer which could be adjusted to be high or low, and could be used as a bed or a recliner. On the device were a dozen buttons for a myriad of functions. One of them displayed the patient's weight while another translated between any of several languages. The nurse spoke to me in English, but the equipment in the bed translated it immediately into Mandarin. When either a Huang or I spoke Mandarin, the device translated it directly into English, not only in text form but also by voice. Every day, an average of between 7 and 8 doctors and nurses worked in a Huang's room. Every day, 4 to 6 infusion tubes supplied intravenous medications 24 hours each day. Blood, urine, and feces were all taken every day to be examined in laboratories. Videos of her heart were taken in which its workings could be seen clearly along with all of the internal organs, the bones, and especially the sternum area. An electrocardiogram image was prepared every day and video displays showed vital stats including the heart rate, blood pressure, and so forth. The doctors and nurses put their sanitary gloves and work clothes on whenever they entered her room and threw them into a dustbin as they left. Almost all the supplies were disposable, so you can imagine how expensive everything must have been. Were it not for Canada's medical technology, a Huang Celestial's life in this mortal world would have ended, and were it not for their medical insurance system, I would have gone bankrupt and would be living on the streets today. This time, the hospital staff told me that during the patient's stay, no relatives or friends would be allowed to accompany them because once they entered the hospital, everything became the hospital's responsibility. Fortunately, I was allowed to enter the hospital to participate in various procedures only as a special case. From this, I understood why such a large hospital is so quiet and no miscellaneous personnel were hanging out. Only doctors, nurses, and other necessary staff workers were there. No one else. The environment in the hospital was clean and spotless, and it had no discernible smells, not even those of alcohol or medicines. What was even more surprising to learn was that in Canadian hospitals, whether a patient is wealthy or a minimum wage worker, a government official or a poor farmer, all are treated the same. Doctors and nurses never provide special care to anyone, and there is never any need or even any opportunity to establish special relationships to go through a backdoor, to be given a good bed or doctor, let alone to send red packets, cash bribes, to anyone. If a Canadian cannot take care of themselves when they become old and they do not have anyone to care for them, everything will be contracted by the Canadian government. Widows and the lonely need not worry about how they will survive. Once one reaches the age of 65, whether they live in a major city or on a farm, and whether they were a government worker or a private enterprise employee, they will receive a monthly pension of nearly 1,200 Canadian dollars, and the government will send a caretaker for anyone who requires help in taking care of themselves at home. By the way, one of our Celestials specializes in doing that kind of work. In addition, Canadian parents enjoy the Canada Child Tax Benefit, which is just over 600 Canadian dollars per month, until they reach the age of 18 years. The child of one of our Canadian Chanyuan Celestials is 13 years old this year, and they receive that amount each month. This is Canada. To anyone who thinks that Canada is a wicked capitalist country, you are wrong. In my opinion, Canada is a very communistic society and is in some ways similar to the Life-Chanuan-style international family. During the 3 years that I have been running a small hotel here, I have felt absolutely zero racial discrimination from anyone, and no government agency, including any police department, has come to check on me. In perfect honesty, apart from seeing uniformed police patrolling the highways, I have never seen any law enforcement agency. Also, I have been driving on the highways for most of my more than 3 years here, and have never been charged any tolls to use any of them. Having benefited so much from Canada, I feel a need to serve this wonderful country. So I have decided to build a home for 300 Chanyuan Celestials here so that our values and mode will take root, blossom, and bear fruit in order to add brilliance to this abundant, beautiful, just free, spectacular, colorful, and great country. Oh Canada!
禅院草如何关爱动物、敬畏生命？
How should Chanyuan Celestials care for animals and revere life? Jiefeng. January 14, 2020. Translated by Qin Yu and edited by Kayer. All of the 8 dogs in one of our Xanadus died. None remain. This was a revelation which informed us that there was a problem with the collective consciousness of our Chanyuan Celestials. It proved that not all the Chanyuan Celestials in the Xanadu cared for life and revered life enough. It was a sign of the imperfection of the Chanyuan Celestials' consciousnesses. At the same time, it meant that there was a huge crisis lurking in our Xanadu, because if animals died in rapid succession, then the people's survival was also in danger. If all kinds of lives grew vigorously there, then that place would be full of vigor and vitality, and its people would live happily and for a long time. Everyone's futures are related closely to other lives, and when they are indifferent to or even abusive of them, then there is no doubt that they will suffer unhappy and stressful futures. Can you imagine a person surviving in a barren desert? There is no doubt that they would not survive for very long by themselves. Why? Because there is no other life. It is only where all kinds of lives thrive and survive easily that people can live well. The 8 dogs in our Xanadu no longer exist. The main responsibility rested with the tour guide because I did not teach everyone how to care for life. It was strictly negligence on my part. Secondly, another main responsibility lied with Dinghai Celestial because I told him clearly to be responsible for feeding the dogs. This showed that Dinghai did not have a strong sense of responsibility, and that he did not care for or revere life enough. It is not difficult to raise dogs. I have raised more than a dozen. Except for one dog who had a pimple on its neck and needed to be taken to the veterinary hospital for surgery. None of the others have ever had any problems which required medications or injections, and they all lived well. To raise dogs, you only need to pay attention to 5 things. The first one is to feed them fresh food at least once every day, but never to let them eat it when it gets stale. The second is to keep them warm in cold weather because dogs cannot tolerate cold weather. The third is that their homes must be kept clean. The fourth is that they must be bathed regularly to remove any parasites from them. And finally, the fifth and most important rule is to make sure that they feel your love for them. It is unlikely that a dog will get sick and die prematurely if you follow these 5 rules. How should Chanyuan Celestials care for animals and revere life? I do not need to say anything profound. I will just give you a few examples. When I was a teacher in Zhangye Pinjuan Body Mine No. 2 Middle School in Gansu, I kept a few cats and some chickens until the chickens were eventually discovered and eaten by weasels. The last chicken always followed a Huang wherever she went. When a Huang cooked in the kitchen, it followed her and laid at her feet. When a Huang was asleep, it laid beside the bed. The cat always walked around her, but as soon as a Huang sat down, it would jump into her arms immediately. Why was that? Because a Huang took special care of and cherished all the little animals. We raised myna birds in the 4th branch, and one day, accidentally, one of them flew out and disappeared. A Huang looked everywhere for it and shouted everywhere, "Myna, come home! Myna, come back!" Suddenly, I witnessed the myna fly over from a distant eucalyptus tree straight into her arms. Do you remember Snow Leopard, our dog from the 4th branch? Aside from his being born with high spirituality, most of his skills were taught to him by a Huang. Do you know how a Huang managed and protected Snow Leopard? At night, afraid that he would be frozen, she put a thick layer of cotton cloth in the carton where he slept. After the puppy lay down, she covered him with an old cotton towel. When she heard his chirping sound at night, she knew that he needed to relieve himself, so she got up quickly and opened the door for him. After he came back, she could then fall back asleep. We had a bird park in the 4th branch. No matter whether there were pigeons or parrots, there were basically no major problems. Do you know how the birds survived? A Huang maintained their food and water every day and never missed one. Otherwise, the birds would have died long before. I dispute with a Huang on a lot of issues, but one thing I have to admire about her is her love for the little animals. I knew a long time ago that a Huang must be rewarded. If we treat all life kindly, then it would treat us kindly too. Today, of all the Chanyuan celestials, a Huang and I have the best living conditions. Why do we? The fundamental reason is that we have treated life kindly, and it is a reward from Tao. Songhai Celestial and Jiahui Celestial should still remember that when I left Zimbabwe before April 18th, I explained to them that we must treat all the lives in the family well, even the grasses and trees, so that there will be no crises in our lives. Even small trees and grasses will help to eliminate many risks. Do you remember how I treated bees and mice kindly? Remember that in our homes, killing snakes is never allowed. Animals are more afraid of cold than people are. I raised a very smart black German Shepherd for the first time in Zimbabwe. One year in winter it was not particularly cold. Usually, the dog slept in his doghouse in the yard, but one day as I opened the door, he insisted on coming inside. I did not normally let him in, but after he squeezed in that day, he would not leave no matter how I pushed him. After a while, I found him hiding curled up behind a sofa and looking at me pitifully. I finally realized that it was too cold outside and that the dog needed warmth. From then on, whenever it was cold, I would add more layer of insulation, even shabby blankets, to his doghouse. We once had 2 kittens in the 4th branch which had been brought from Linsong by Sen, but they both died soon thereafter. I will tell you why that happened. Both of them had frozen to death. After I found that one of the kittens had frozen to death, I hurriedly took the other one to my room and let it crawl into my bed, but sadly, many of its internal organs had already stopped functioning and it died the following day. I raised a few dogs when I lived in a villa next to an embassy in Zimbabwe. In the end, there were too many of them, so I gave a dog named De Huang to the girl who washed clothes for me. De Huang was tall and powerful, but he died within a few days after the girl's father brought him into their home. The girl said that ever since he brought De Huang into their house, he never ate or drank, and finally succumbed to thirst and starvation. Another 2 dogs I raised in Zimbabwe, Lem and Rambo, were both fine when I was there, but as soon as I left, they died in rapid succession. Rambo was said to have been hit by a car. Given the above examples, I want everyone to know how to love animals and revere lives. Ask yourself, have you ever cared for lives like this? If you have not, it means that the structure of your life is still too rough, and that you are not yet worthy to enter heaven.
为什么生命禅院里剩下的都是老实人？